Here we go. Reveal the conflict card. Each player draws 5 cards. Yellow is first. Yellow plays a card for an agent icon to move to smuggling. Yellow moves 1 step up the shipping track and receives 1 Solari. House Hagal draws Dreadnought and places an agent on Dreadnought. Hagal receives 1 Dreadnought and 1 troop to its garrison. Blue plays a card for an agent icon to move to Stillsuits. Blue moves 1 step up the Fremen influence track. Blue receives 1 water. Blue moves 2 troops into the conflict. Yellow plays a card for an agent icon to move to Hardy Warriors, which costs 1 water. Yellow moves up the Fremen influence track. Yellow gains 2 troops and moves 3 troops into the conflict. Hagal draws Smuggling, which is blocked. Hagal draws Dreadnought, which is blocked. Hagal draws Fold Space and places an agent on Fold Space. Hagal moves up the Guild influence track. Blue plays a card to move to Carthage. Blue receives a troop and moves 2 troops into the conflict. Blue receives an Intrigue card. Blue uses his Signet Ring ability to place a troop as a technology negotiator. Yellow reveals her cards. Yellow's combat strength is 6. Yellow has 5 influence to buy a card and chooses Liet Kynes, which moves Yellow up the Emperor's influence track. Yellow discards and the card row is refilled. Blue reveals his cards. Blue's combat strength is 9. Blue buys a card, Arrakis Liaison. Blue discards. Blue wins the conflict, which moves him 1 step up the shipping track. Blue also receives 1 spice. Blue plays an Intrigue card, which grants Blue 3 spice for winning the conflict. Yellow is second in the conflict, so Yellow gets 3 Solari. Clean up the conflict. All participating troops return to the supply. Unoccupied desert locations gain a bonus spice. Everyone retrieves their agent. The first player marker moves. Round 2, reveal the new conflict card. Each player draws 5 cards. Blue plays a card to move to smuggling. Blue receives 1 Solari. Blue moves down the shipping track. Blue gets 5 Solari. Yellow gets 1 Solari. Hagal draws Conspire. Hagal places an agent on Conspire. Hagal moves up the Emperor's influence track. Hagal receives 2 troops. Yellow plays a card to place an agent on Wealth. Yellow moves up on the Emperor's influence track. Yellow gets a point for 2 influence with the Emperor, and Yellow receives 2 Solari. This card is trashed after it is played. Blue plays a card to go to Fold Space. Blue moves up the Guild influence track. Blue gains a Fold Space card to his discard pile. This card is trashed after it is played. Hagal draws Harvest Spice. Hagal places an agent on the Great Flat and removes the bonus spice there. Hagal moves 2 units into the conflict. Yellow plays a card to move to Imperial Basin. Yellow receives 2 spice. Yellow moves 2 troops into the conflict. Yellow uses her Signet Ring ability. Yellow pays 1 spice to move up the Guild influence track. Blue reveals his cards. Blue buys Guild Administrator. Refill the card row. Blue discards. Yellow reveals her cards. Yellow's combat strength is 6. Yellow buys Assassination Mission. Yellow discards. Hagal draws a combat modifier +2. Hagal's combat strength is 7. Yellow gets second place in the conflict, which gives Yellow an Intrigue card and a water. Clean up the combat. The winning Dreadnought moves to Imperial Basin. Participating troops return to the supply. Unoccupied desert spaces gain a bonus spice. Everyone retrieves their agents. Pass the first player marker. Round 3. Reveal the new conflict card. Shuffle and draw 5 cards. Yellow plays a card. To move to Swordmaster, Yellow pays 7 Solari and receives another agent. Hagal draws Arakeen and moves an agent to Arakeen. Hagal gains a troop and moves 3 troops into the conflict. Blue plays a card. To move to Conspire, which costs 4 spice. Blue moves up the Emperor's Influence track. Blue receives 5 Solari, 2 troops, and an Intrigue card. Fold space is trashed after 1 use. Fold space enables Blue to draw a card. Yellow plays a card. To move to Carthage. Yellow gets an Intrigue card and a troop. Yellow moves the troop into the conflict. Yellow's Signet Ring ability doesn't work because Yellow is ahead on all influence tracks. Hagal draws Carthage, but it's blocked. Hagal draws Reshuffle, so we shuffle. Hagal draws Selective Breeding and moves an agent to Selective Breeding. Hagal moves up the Bene Gesserit influence track. Blue plays a card. To move to Haga Basin, which costs a water. Blue receives 4 spice. Blue decides not to enter the conflict. Yellow decides not to use her last agent. Yellow reveals her cards. Yellow's combat strength is 4. Yellow's card grants her 1 Solari. Yellow buys Arrakis Liaison. Blue reveals his cards. Blue buys Hither de Vries. Blue discards. Hagal draws a combat modifier of 2. Hagal's combat strength is 8. Yellow does not play a combat intrigue card. Yellow is second in the conflict, so Yellow receives 2 water. Clean up the conflict. Hagal's Dreadnought returns to its garrison. Unoccupied desert locations gain a bonus spice. Everyone retrieves their agents. Pass the first player marker. Round 4. Reveal the new conflict card. Shuffle if needed. Draw 5 cards. Blue plays a card. To move to Swordmaster, blue pays 8 Solari. And receives an additional agent. Blue uses Signet Ring ability to buy a technology, which costs 4 spice, reduced by 1 spice by using blue's technology negotiator. Blue pays 3 spice. Blue receives 2 intrigue cards. Hagal draws still suits and moves an agent to still suit. Hagal moves up the From an Influence track and moves 1 Dreadnought into the conflict. Yellow plays a card. To move to Hardy Warriors, which costs 1 water. Yellow moves up the From an Influence track and gets a point. Yellow gains 2 troops and moves them into the conflict. Blue plays a card. To move to Dreadnought, which costs 3 Solari. Blue gains a Dreadnought. Hagal draws Interstellar Shipping, but lacks the necessary influence. Hagal draws Harvest Spice and moves an agent to the Great Flat. Hagal removes the bonus spice there. Yellow plays a card. To move to Siege Tabor, Yellow receives a water and a troop. Yellow moves the troop into the conflict. Blue plays a card. To move to Imperial Basin, Blue receives 2 spice. Blue moves 2 units into the conflict. Hagal draws Arakeen and moves an agent to Arakeen. Hagal gains a troop and moves it into the conflict. Yellow plays a card. To move to Smuggling, Yellow receives 1 Solari and moves down the shipping track. Yellow gets 5 Solari, Blue gets 1 Solari. Blue reveals his cards. Blue's Dreadnought is worth 4. Blue's combat strength is 7. Blue discards. Yellow reveals her cards. Yellow's combat strength is 6. Yellow buys a Raucous Liaison. Yellow discards. Hagal draws a combat modifier of 1. Hagal's combat strength is 6. Yellow plays a combat intrigue card, which increases Yellow's combat strength to 10. Blue plays a combat intrigue card, which costs 2 spice, and increases Blue's combat strength to 12. No one wants to play any more intrigue cards. Blue wins the conflict, receiving a point. Blue can also trash a card. Yellow is second in the conflict. Yellow gets a water and a spice. Clean up the conflict. Blue places his Dreadnought on Carthage. Note that losing Dreadnoughts return to garrison. Unoccupied desert locations gain a bonus spice. Everyone retrieves their agents. Pass the first player marker. Round 5, reveal the new conflict card. Shuffle and draw 5 cards. Yellow plays a card. To move to Hardy Warriors, which costs a water. Yellow moves up the From an Influence track Yellow receives 2 troops and places 1 troop into the conflict. Hagal draws Highliner and places an agent on Highliner. Hagal moves up the guild influence track. Hagal receives 3 troops and moves 4 units into the conflict. Blue plays a card. To move to fold space. Blue moves up the guild influence track. Blue gets a point. Blue gets a fold space card. Blue can also trash a card. Yellow plays a card to go to Still Stutes. Yellow gets a water and an alliance with the Fremen. Yellow gets a point and another water. Hagal draws Hardy Warriors, but it's blocked. Hagal draws Conspire and moves an agent to Conspire. Hagal moves up the Emperor's Influence track. Hagal gains 2 troops. Blue plays a card to move to Carthage. Blue gains a troop and moves 2 troops into the conflict. Blue gains an Intrigue card and a Solari. Yellow plays a card to move to Dreadnought, which costs 2 Solari, discounted 1 due to leader. Yellow gets a Dreadnought. Yellow pays 2 spice to buy a technology, which gives Yellow an Intrigue card. Hagal draws Harvest Spice and moves an agent to Haga Basin, where Hagal removes the bonus spice. Hagal moves 2 troops into the conflict. Blue plays a card to move to tech negotiation. Blue places a troop as a technology negotiator. Yellow reveals her cards. Yellow's combat strength is 2. Yellow doesn't buy a card. Blue reveals his card. Blue buys a Raucous Liaison. Blue's combat strength is 4. Blue discards. Hagal draws a combat modifier of 0. Hagal's combat strength is 13. Blue is second in the combat, gaining a water and a spice. Clean up the conflict. Hagal's winning Dreadnought goes to Imperial Basin. Blue's Dreadnought returns to Garrison. Unoccupied desert locations gain a bonus spice. Everyone retrieves their agents. Pass the first player marker. Round 6, reveal the new conflict card. Shuffle if necessary, and draw 5 cards. Blue plays a card to move to Great Flat. Which costs 2 water. Blue receives 4 spice. Blue moves 1 Dreadnought into the conflict. Blue uses Signet Ring to buy a technology, which costs 4 spice and 1 technology negotiator. Blue draws 2 cards. Hagal draws Carthage and moves an agent to Carthage. Hagal gains 1 troop which moves into the conflict. Yellow plays a card to move to Imperial Basin. Yellow gets 2 spice. Yellow moves 2 units into the conflict. Blue plays a card to move to secrets. Blue moves up the Bene Gesserit influence track. Blue gets an intrigue card. Blue plays an intrigue card. To move up the Bene Gesserit influence track, blue gets a point. Hagal draws Arakeen and moves an agent to Arakeen. Hagal gains a troop which moves into the conflict. Yellow plays a card. To move to research station, which costs 2 water. Yellow draws 3 cards. Yellow uses Signet Ring ability, which costs 1 spice, to move up the guild influence track. Yellow gets a point. Blue plays a card. To move to interstellar shipping. Blue moves up and then down the shipping track. Blue gets 5 Solari, yellow gets 1 Solari. Hagal draws fold space and moves an agent to fold space. Hagal advances on the guild influence track. Yellow plays a card. To go to Dreadnought, which costs 2 Solari. Yellow gets Dreadnought. Yellow does not buy a technology. Blue reveals his hand. Blue's combat strength is 4. Blue buys Ixtian Engineer. Blue can place new cards on his draw pile. Blue discards. Yellow reveals her cards. Yellow's combat strength is 7. Yellow gets 1 Solari. Yellow buys Siege Reverend Mother. Yellow discards. Hagal draws a combat modifier of 4. Hagal's combat strength is 8. Neither player plays an intrigue card. Yellow is second in the combat. Yellow receives 1 intrigue card and 1 spice. Clean up the combat. Hagal's Dreadnought returns to garrison. Unoccupied desert locations gain a bonus spice. Everyone retrieves their agents. Pass the first player marker. Round 7. Reveal the new conflict card. Shuffle if necessary and draw 5 cards. Yellow plays a card. To move to interstellar shipping. Yellow moves up and then down the shipping track. Yellow gets 5 Solari. Blue gets 1 Solari. Yellow uses Signet Ring, which costs 1 spice, to move up the Bene Gesserit influence track. Yellow plays an intrigue card, which costs 7 Solari, and gives yellow a point. Hagal draws selective breeding. Hagal moves an agent to selective breeding. Hagal moves up the Bene Gesserit influence track. Blue plays a card to move to Dreadnought. Which costs 3 Solari. Blue gets a Dreadnought. Blue gets an intrigue card. Blue plays an intrigue card, which costs 2 Solari. Blue moves up the Fremen influence track. Blue gets a point. Yellow plays a card to move to secrets. Yellow moves up the Bene Gesserit influence track. Yellow gets a point. Yellow gets an intrigue card. Hagal draws Arakeen and moves an agent to Arakeen. Hagal gets 1 troop. Hagal moves 2 units into the conflict. Blue plays a card to move to Imperial Basin. Blue gets 1 spice. Blue moves 2 dreadnoughts into the conflict. Yellow plays a card to move to Hardy Warriors. Which costs 1 water. Yellow gets 2 troops and moves 3 units into the conflict. Hagal draws Carthage and moves an agent to Carthage. Hagal gets a troop which moves into the conflict. Blue plays a card to move to Mentat, which costs 2 Solari. Blue draws a card and takes the Mentat. Yellow reveals her cards. Yellow's combat strength is 9. Yellow buys Imperial Spy. Blue plays a card to move to Siege Tabor. Blue gains 1 water and a troop. Blue moves the troop into the conflict. Blue can draw a card, and fold space is trashed. Blue reveals his cards. Blue's combat strength is 10. Blue buys Guild Ambassador. Blue discards. Hagal draws a combat modifier of 2. Hagal's combat strength is 9. Yellow plays an intrigue card. Yellow's combat strength increases to 11. Blue plays an intrigue card. Blue's combat strength increases to 12, and each opponent must retreat a dreadnought. Blue wins the conflict and gains 2 points. Blue places a banner on Imperial Basin. Yellow is second in the conflict, gaining 5 spice. Clean up the conflict. Blue places a dreadnought on Carthage. Unoccupied desert locations gain a bonus spice. Everyone retrieves their agent. Pass the first player marker. Round 8, reveal the new conflict card. Draw 5 cards. Blue plays a card to move to Hagal Basin, which costs 1 water. Blue gets 4 spice. Blue moves Dreadnought into the conflict. Hagal draws Reshuffle. We shuffle. Hagal draws Still Suits and places an agent on Still Suit. Hagal moves up the Fremen influence track and moves a Dreadnought into the conflict. Yellow plays a card to move to Tech Negotiation. Yellow pays 5 spice to buy a technology. which increases Yellow's influence on 2 tracks. Yellow picks Bene Gesserit and Emperor. Blue plays a card to move to Highliner, which costs 6 spice. Blue gets 5 troops, which go into the conflict. Blue gets 2 water. Hagal draws Carthage and moves an agent to Carthage. Hagal gets a troop, which moves into the conflict. Blue gets 1 Solari. Yellow plays a card to move to secrets. Yellow moves up the Bene Gesserit influence track. Yellow gains an alliance with the Bene Gesserit. Yellow gets a point. Yellow gets an intrigue card. Yellow can trash a card. When trashed, Assassination Mission gives 4 Solari. Yellow gets 4 Solari. Blue plays a card to move to Arakin. Blue gets a troop. Blue draws a card. Hagal draws Carthage, which is blocked. Hagal draws Arakin, which is blocked. Hagal draws Carthage, which is blocked. Hagal draws Harvest Spice and places an agent on the Great Flat. Hagal removes the bonus spice there. Yellow plays an intrigue card, which allows Yellow to discard twice and draw twice. Yellow discards 2 cards to draw 2 cards. Yellow plays a card to move to Siege Tabor. Yellow gets a water and a troop. Yellow moves 3 units into the conflict. Yellow's technology can be discarded to place intrigue cards on the bottom of the deck and draw new ones. Yellow gets new intrigue cards. Blue plays an intrigue card to recall an agent. Blue recalls an agent. Blue plays a card to move to Imperial Basin. Blue gets 2 spice, including the control bonus. Blue moves a troop into the conflict. Blue uses his Signet Ring ability to buy a technology for 3 spice. Hagal doesn't have any agents to place. Yellow reveals her cards. Yellow's combat strength is 8. Yellow discards. Blue reveals his cards. Blue's combat strength is 16. Blue discards. Hagal draws a combat modifier of 2. Hagal's combat strength is 7. Neither player plays an intrigue card. Blue wins the combat and gets 2 points. Blue places a banner on Arakin. Blue's technology can be trashed to discard his winning dreadnought and gain a point. Yellow is second in the conflict and gets 2 spice and an intrigue card. Clean up the combat. Blue's other dreadnought returns to garrison. Unoccupied desert locations gain a bonus spice. Everyone retrieves their agents. Pass the first player marker. Round 9, reveal the new conflict card. Shuffle if needed, and draw 5 cards. Yellow plays a card to move to wealth. Yellow moves up the Emperor influence track. Yellow gains an alliance with the Emperor. A point. 2 troops. And 2 Solari. Hagal draws Hardy Warriors and moves an agent to Hardy Warriors. Hagal gains 2 troops and moves up the Fremen influence track. Hagal moves 3 units into the conflict. Blue plays a card to move to Haga Basin, which costs 1 water. Blue gains 3 spice. Blue moves 1 dreadnought into the conflict. Yellow plays a card to move to Arakin. Yellow gets a troop and draws a card. Blue gets 1 Solari. Yellow places 3 units into the conflict. Hagal draws Conspire and moves an agent to Conspire. Hagal moves up the Emperor influence track. Hagal gains 2 troops. Blue plays a card to move to Carthage. Blue gets a troop, which moves into the conflict. Blue gets an intrigue card. Yellow plays a card to move to Siege Tabor. Yellow gets a water and a troop. Yellow moves a total of 2 troops into the conflict. Hagal draws a Harvest Spice and moves an agent to Imperial Basin. Blue gets a spice. Hagal moves 2 troops into the conflict. Blue plays a card to move to Tech Negotiation. Blue buys a technology, which costs 4 spice with 1 discount. Blue gets 4 troops. Yellow plays an intrigue card, which gives her an extra influence to buy cards. Yellow plays another intrigue card, which lets her deploy more troops into the conflict. Yellow's combat strength is 17. Yellow buys Kriz Knife. Blue reveals his hand. Blue's combat strength is 6. Blue buys the Daikin Death Commando. Hagal draws a combat modifier of 2 for total combat strength of 13. No one plays an intrigue card. Yellow gets a point. Yellow spends 6 Solari to get her 10th point. Neither player has an endgame scoring card, so that's the end. Yellow wins.